Hey, World Cruisers. It is a July 3rd, 2024, and we are just landing here in the port of Cherbourg, France, which was a major shipping port used after the capture of the beaches on D-Day, June 6, 1944. This port was one of the two objectives. This and Le Havre was one of the two objectives that they came to take over. So the action on June 6, 1944 started here in Sainte-Mere-Eglise, where the paratroopers, I think it was 101st Airborne, uh, the 82nd Airborne, landed very early in the morning while it was still dark. They landed in Sainte-Mere-Eglise, and two of the paratroopers got stuck on the top of this church. One of them played dead until he got captured when they figured out he was still alive. The other one, because he was on the backside where the Germans couldn't see him, was able to escape into the neighboring village. And this is a special stained glass window to commemorate that event on June 6th. And I wish you could see it up close. There's a lot of inscriptions that have to do. They have to do with the invasion. There's paratroopers shown there. There's a acknowledgement to the airborne divisions that participated. But the church has some beautiful stained glass. So when we get outside here, I'll take a walk around the outside of the church and show you where the paratroopers got hung up on the steeple of this chapel. I think it's a 13th or 14th century church, he said. Been around there for a long time. So that bell tower or steeple up there is where the paratroopers got hung up, two of them, one on each side. And they have a parachute with a dummy hanging up there. You'll be able to see it on the way back on the back side. But it's physically not hanging in the actual spot where the paratrooper got stuck. Because the paratrooper got stuck on this corner that you see here that's closest to you. But they have the sample parachute guy on the other side, 180 degrees off from that corner. But this is what started the whole D-Day operation, is they were to land behind enemy lines and take this city and the crossroads and then wait for the others. There you can see the white parachute up there on the top corner. Right in the square in front of the church, there is a statue of Eisenhower, who was the Supreme Commander of Operation Overlord on June 6th. So our first objective was to get to Utah Beach, which today is used by a bunch of the local folks to train their racehorses. And it's interesting that the streets in that area are all named after servicemen that were killed during the conflict. And this is the marker at the beach as you approach the actual beach off the streets that you drive in through. The first thing you pass on the way in is the German bunker, that concrete structure to your left behind that house. The Germans apparently took over the house and threw the people out, and then constructed their bunker, which was their command center. Then as you walk down to the beach, there's a sample of a Higgins landing boat. That's a landing craft that the troops use. There's 156,000 troops landed on day one of D-Day. And many of them came ashore on these Higgins boats. They were built in Louisiana. This is a sample one made out of metal, but I think the original ones were actually made out of plywood. So it was a crew of 4, and then I think 12 or 18 soldiers fully equipped were in there, something like that. Then they dropped the gate, and then the soldiers rushed out. So the interesting thing is that the experience that the military, the Allied forces had on Utah Beach was much different, much better than it was on Omaha. And you'll see why in a minute. There were less than 200 casualties on that first day in breaking through the German defenses here at Utah Beach, because the ground is not that high. You can see the berms are relatively short, and the Germans did not have this section of beach defended as well as they did over at Omaha. So this landing here was very successful on D-Day. Within less than an hour, they had the beach under their control, and the Germans, most of them came out of the bunkers with their hands up when they realized the numbers they were up against. So we're looking to the right. We'll look down the beach, and these beaches were connected. It's not continuous beach. It goes to cliffs on both sides. So there's a stretch of beach with cliffs on both sides. That building you saw up there was a museum. Now that's Pointe du Hoc out there in the distance that you can see. And the Germans had 6 large guns out there at the end of Pointe du Hoc, and they were trained on Utah Beach the morning of the invasion. But the Rangers who landed out there took the guns out, and I'll explain that when we get to Pointe du Hoc. So we go Utah Beach, Pointe du Hoc, and then on the other side of Pointe du Hoc is Omaha Beach. And that's where the real bloodbath occurred, at Omaha Beach. So this was a successful landing, less than 200 casualties, and they controlled the area within a couple hours of their landing time. I think the landing was 6:30. This is the actual channel that this soldiers used to come up off the beach. It's called Causeway number 2. And they were supposed to land down there where you're looking, farther down to the left at Causeway 3, but they ended up, because of the currents and tides and winds, they ended up coming in at Causeway 2 instead. And this is the naval, it's a tribute to the Navy guys who did the bombardment of the beach from the ships on the morning of June 6th. It's a naval memorial. Kind of hard to see, but there's a guy loading shells. Right there, he's holding a shell. This is what a Sherman tank looks like. The original wave had something like 32 of these tanks to come ashore, but only either 2, 3, or 4 came ashore because most of them sank. They had canvas boat covers underneath them, and the water was too rough, and like 30 of them sank, and most of the crews were lost. Only 2 or 3 made it to shore. One of them got bogged down, and those 2 at least provided some cover fire for the other troops as they came ashore. Okay, the next stop was Angleville on our way over to Pointe du Hoc, and this place is significant because they were, I think it was the 83rd Airborne, I'm not sure, 101st, I'm not sure. They landed here. This was their landing area, and there were a lot of injured from the landing. They holed up in this church, and there were 2 guys with less than 2 months of medic experience that were the medical guys in charge of helping them here. And the Germans kicked in the door. They put up Red Cross flag on the door to show that it wasn't a combatant area. Germans kicked in the door, looked inside with their guns, and saw all the wounded troops. The guy crossed himself and left. It left him alone. It didn't hurt him. But there's several kind of miracles occurred here. A bomb came down through the top, the roof up there where you're looking at round circles. The up goes up to the tower on the church, and just this side of it you see has some holes. It was a mortar shell or some kind of a bomb, grenade, rocket grenade or something came down through that hole, landed on the floor where that crack was, but it didn't explode with all those folks inside the church. It would have killed a lot of them, but it didn't go off. So those two medics were awarded special accommodations after the war. You see that crack in the floor tile was where the grenade or the bomb or whatever it was hit. And the benches still have the blood stains on them from that's where they put the soldiers. You can see blood stains right and left. And so eventually they got them all out, all but only 2 of them died, and the rest of them were spared. One of the 2 medics decided he wanted to have part of his ashes buried here. So fairly recently, this is the grave of where his ashes went. So our next stop was Pointe. The Germans had 6 of these guns in that placement there, and it was defending both Utah Beach and Omaha. They could fire to the left, they would hit Utah Beach. If they fired to the right, they'd hit Omaha. Those guns had a 12-mile range, and the beaches were only 7 miles away, so they could have easily reached both Omaha and Utah beaches. So these concrete bunkers here at Pointe are the ones they built. They started to build replacements. The original gun emplacements were above ground and were circular, and then they built 2 of these heavily fortified gun placements before D-Day. They didn't finish the other 4, so only 2 of them are here, and they were built to replace the open, flat, circular one you can see right in front here. That's what's left of that gun, the old gun emplacement that was being replaced by the heavily fortified one. And what you're going to see as you walk down here, that's his second emplacement right there that they finished. Observation deck now on top of it. But all these holes you see here are craters from bombs. They're huge craters all over the place. This place was just peppered with bomb craters. The Allies did do some bombing of it before D-Day, but they couldn't bomb here purposefully because it would have given away the location of the landing point. So the Germans had this bunker out on the end of the point. This is the end of Pointe du Hoc, and it was an observation post, quite elaborate on the inside. So we'll get to take a walk down in. So the shores here have about 100-foot cliff that the Rangers had to scale. I think there was something like 225 Rangers that came and landed here. They were supposed to land half on one side of the point, half on the other. They all landed on the right side because of the winds and currents, and so they scaled those cliffs just off to your right. The ladders they brought weren't tall enough, so they had to use rocket-propelled grappling hooks to get a purchase on top of the hill. And the first ones were up the hill within 5 minutes because he found a stairway, a rock stairway. And the rest of them came up, and they determined that the 6 guns that they thought were there were not actually there. The Germans had replaced them with telephone poles. So in the aerial photographs, they looked like guns, but they were actually only telephone poles. So then they had to go inland looking for where the guns were, and they found them in an orchard several hundred yards off the beach. So we're going to go down inside that observation bunker and take a quick look around. We'll get the feel for it. There's a lot of different rooms, ammunition storage, I imagine. It was protected by a machine gun up on top, but mainly it was for observation. And I guess there's a lot of, troop housing and whatnot in there. But we're going to make our way out to the room where the observation troops were stationed. So they would look out that crack. The interesting part about this was that the gun crews were nowhere to be found. When the Rangers landed, as I mentioned before, they had to go back and several hundred yards off the beach to find where the guns were in an orchard. And they were able to take the 6 guns and use thermite grenades to put down the barrels to take the guns out, because there were no Germans manning them. And apparently, because of the bad weather the night before, on the 5th of June, the commander of the gun crews had given them the night off to go attend a party, and a lot of them were drunk and not present, so it made the Rangers' job a lot easier. So the Rangers stayed and defended that position for several days before they were reinforced by the troops that came in on Omaha Beach. So here's Omaha Beach, and you'll see the terrain is much different than it is on Utah Beach. The hills are much higher and much more heavily fortified by German gun positions. And as it turned out, the troops came ashore. One unit had 85% rate of being wounded or killed within the first 20 minutes. So this was a very difficult landing. They estimate that somewhere around, I think the tour guide said 4,500 casualties on Omaha Beach alone. And the good fortune was that the Germans, there were a couple of places between the German fortifications where they could get out. Right where those people are standing, there's a group of like 4 people standing off to your right. That was the place where the troops were able to get out off the beach and get away from the German fire. They hid behind the Czech tank lot. This thing was heavily defended with these steel structures to keep the tanks off. The steel structures were mined, and the troops, a lot of them, when they came off the landing boats, hid behind those. When they finally did find a way to get off the beach between the German fortifications, they came up this path right here, and this last bunker was their last fortification of the Germans that the American troops had to get past. And you'll see it in a minute. They escaped off the beach up that hill you can see behind the bunker. It goes from left to right. And so this gun that you can see in that opening right there was the last thing they had to blast away. And apparently a half-track hit it with a shell, and you'll see on the inside where it hit the gun and killed everybody inside and permanently damaged the gun. And once that was done, then the troops could get off the beach. So see the big hole in the armor right there on the right-hand side, and there's a big divot in the concrete. That's where the shell came in there and hit and destroyed everybody in the bunker and the gun, and then the troops could make it off the beach. So this was a significant location, the portal to freedom. So our last stop was the American Cemetery, which is above Omaha Beach. From the cemetery you can look down on the beach, and this is a beautiful place. Look at how well maintained. I mean, it's immaculate. The trees are cut short to signify a symbolic of having the servicemen having their lives cut short. There are 9,388 U.S. service men and women buried here. Only 4 women, the rest are men, at the cemetery. And most recently, they're still finding some remains, and the families have an option to either repatriate them back to the United States or allow them to be buried here at the American Cemetery. So all the graves have a cross marker on it, except for I think he said there's 40 or 50 Jewish service members that have a Star of David on them instead of a cross. There you're looking down on Omaha Beach. You can see the ocean out there. This is a beautiful monument and a memorial to all of those that died on the invasion during D-Day. This is the tribute to them. It says, "This embattled shore, portal of freedom, is forever hallowed by the ideals, the valor, and the sacrifice of our fellow countrymen." So we'll turn around and have one last look at the American Cemetery. Then we got back in our van and headed back. It's about an hour and 15 minutes back to the port of Cherbourg where we left. And we had to get back on the ship. So here we are leaving Cherbourg. We visit Le Havre tomorrow. So stay tuned for some more of France tomorrow at Le Havre.